At 28, I thought I was finally on my own path, building a career and chasing my dreams. But when my family's bakery hit rock bottom, I gave up everything to save it. Little did I know, the very people I was fighting for would betray me in the end. What happens when a promise is broken and your family turns against you? Stick around to find out how I fought for what's rightfully mine and the shocking truth I uncovered. I was 28 when everything my family built teetered on the edge of collapse. Our bakery, Harper & Sons, had been in our bloodline for 3 generations. My grandfather opened it with a beat-up oven, a head full of dreams, and a sourdough starter that could stop time. My dad carried it forward, transforming the little shop into a beloved community staple. The kind of place where regulars brought their grandkids and the smell of fresh bread wrapped around you like a warm hug. For decades, we felt untouchable, until we weren't. It started slow, a bad investment here, a sudden spike in rent there. Then a lawsuit hit over a mislabeled gluten-free pastry. It was like a slow-motion train wreck, one disaster following another, each blow leaving deeper cracks in the foundation. By the time the dust settled, we weren't just struggling. We were dangling months from bankruptcy. I can still see the look on my father's face that night. We sat around the chipped kitchen table, the one with years of flour etched into its grain. Papers were scattered everywhere. Unpaid bills, loan notices, bank statements. His hands trembled as he pushed a folder toward me. "We're not going to make it," he said, voice low, defeated. My mom didn't cry. She just looked drained, like someone who hadn't slept in years. Her words were soft but heavy. Unless someone steps in, someone who knows the modern market, someone with energy. They meant me. Of course they did. I had just finished my MBA. I was on the rise, working at a fast-growing food brand in the city. My days were long, my nights longer, but I was finally making my own path. I had goals, real, tangible ones. But when I met my father's eyes, something shifted inside me. Before they even said it out loud, I knew. "Yes," I whispered, without hesitation. "You try to make it sound like a business deal. We're not asking for charity. When the bakery recovers, you'll be a partner. Full rights. The business will be yours. You've earned it." Mom added, "We promise. We'll make it official." That word, promise, it felt safe back then, like a shield. So I left everything behind. My job, my apartment, my momentum. I moved back into my childhood bedroom, dusted off the apron, and got to work. The rebirth, every morning, I was up before the sun. 4:30 a.m., without fail. I dragged myself out of bed, lace up my shoes, and step into that cold, familiar kitchen. The same floors I'd played on as a child were now the ones I scrubbed every night. I wasn't just helping out. I became the engine of that place. The hands, the heart, the backbone. I baked. I cleaned. I rebranded. I created the new logo myself after hours spent squinting at design software I barely understood. I did payroll, ran social media, argued with vendors who tried to walk all over us. I stayed up late building marketing campaigns and loyalty programs, then got up before dawn to knead dough with cracked hands. And somehow, slowly, steadily, it started to work. Week by week, we chipped away at the mountain of debt. Month by month, the numbers in our books started climbing in the right direction. I introduced delivery services and seasonal menus. I streamlined our operations and cut waste. I didn't just keep the bakery alive, I gave it a heartbeat again. Then the local paper ran a story. Family bakery makes a comeback. Customers returned. Some cried. Many thanked me. But I never asked for credit. I didn't need applause or praise. I had the promise. The one that whispered to me in the silence when I collapsed in a bed with sore feet and flour in my hair. "You saved us," Dad said one night, as we turned off the lights and locked the door. "You really did." My mother hugged me tightly, resting her cheek against my shoulder. "We'll never forget this, Nora." And neither would I, because 4 years later, nearly to the day, we did more than survive. We broke even. Not just stable, profitable. I'll never forget that morning. I sat at my tiny desk in the back office, staring at the final numbers, my hands trembling as I printed the report. No more debt, no more fear. The books had balanced. The bakery was whole again. I held that paper like it was a trophy. "We did it," I whispered. Dad smiled. But this time, it didn't quite reach his eyes. I should have seen it then. I should have known. The betrayal we decided to celebrate. Just something small, sparkling cider, a few cupcakes, regulars dropping by to say congratulations. Our staff toasted in plastic cups, laughter echoing through the walls I'd worked so hard to keep standing. Even my younger brother, Ethan, made an appearance. He strolled in late, sun-kissed from 3 months in Costa Rica, talking about his spiritual reset and showing off a blurry tattoo he half remembered getting. Classic Ethan. Always charming. Always floating through life like consequences didn't apply to him. Ethan had never set an alarm for 4 a.m. He'd never stood in a walk-in freezer, crying behind racks of bread because a supplier flaked out during the holiday rush. He'd never negotiated a vendor contract, never burned his hands on hot pans, never fought to keep the lights on when the bank balance was a joke. But he smiled like he belonged there. When the guests left and the music faded, my parents called us into the back office. "We want to tell you both together," Mom said, smiling that soft, practiced smile. My heart thudded in my chest. This was it. The moment they'd make it official. Recognition, respect, the future. "Your father and I have decided," she continued, "to hand over the shop to Ethan." I blinked. Then I laughed, quiet first like I'd misheard, then louder, until the silence in the room wrapped around me like ice. They weren't joking. Dad cleared his throat. "Nora, what you've done has been incredible. You turned this place around. But Ethan, he's the man of the family. It's time he learns the ropes." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I felt like I was watching my own life from outside my body. The years I'd given. The sacrifices. The promise. "I gave you 4 years," I said finally, barely above a whisper. "I gave up everything." "You're being emotional," Mom said quickly. "You'll always have a place here." A place? Like I was just another employee. A background character in a story I had written. They handed it all to Ethan. Just like that. And I said nothing. Not that night. But a week later, I picked up the phone, and I called a lawyer. The awakening the next morning was the first one in 4 years where I didn't set an alarm. No smell of cinnamon rolls in the oven. No burnt espresso or flour clinging to my sleeves. Just silence and the ceiling above my bed. I lay there, unmoving, empty. How do you even begin to move forward when the people who raised you are the ones who buried you? It wasn't confusion. No, it was something sharper, colder, clearer. Clarity, the kind that cuts through everything else. They hadn't made a mistake. They hadn't misunderstood. They chose. They chose him. And I wasn't going to pretend they didn't. At first, I told myself maybe it was a rash decision. Maybe they'd realize what they'd done. Call me. Apologize. See how cruel it was to give my blood, sweat, and tears to someone who had barely shown up to Thanksgiving dinner, let alone a 5 a.m. shift. But the phone didn't ring. Instead, I got a group text from Mom. "Let's stay positive. So proud of our family's next chapter. Ethan's first day as official manager." Attached was a photo. Ethan behind my counter, in my apron, smiling like he'd earned it. Something inside me cracked. I stood up, walked over to my laptop, opened a folder labeled Harper & Sons. Inside was everything: spreadsheets, branding plans, marketing campaigns, vendor contracts, employee handbooks. 4 years of my life, mapped out and meticulous. Every decision, every strategy, every hard-earned win. All of it mine, and all of it handed to someone else like it was a free sample cookie at the register. That's when I called the lawyer. His name was Mr. Ellis, a quiet man with a calm voice, recommended by a friend who'd gone through something similar with a family vineyard. I told him everything. The promise, the sacrifice, the betrayal. He listened, patient, careful, and then he asked one question. Did they ever put anything in writing? I hesitated. No formal contract. But yes. Emails. Texts. A message from my dad a year ago that said, "This business will be yours soon. Just hang in there. You've more than earned it." Mr. Ellis didn't miss a beat. Then we might have something to work with. A flicker of something stirred inside me. Not revenge. Not yet. Just the faintest hope. "But can I really do this?" I asked. "Legally take on my family?" He paused, then said something I'll never forget. "Family is supposed to be built on loyalty, not just DNA. If they used you, if they lied to you, to get free labor for 4 years, then what they did wasn't just unethical. It might have been unlawful. Unlawful." The word echoed in my mind like a gavel hitting the bench. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I had been exploited. And now I had a choice. Truth or silence. I chose truth. That night, I scoured every message I had. Emails, shared drives, meeting notes, screenshots. I even found one with the subject line, "Ownership Transfer Draft. Let's review," from my mom. They had included me in every business decision, except the one that mattered. The legal one. There was no LLC update. No equity split. No puppet work. Just a promise. And a lie. The case Mr. Ellis combed through every piece of evidence I sent him. Screenshots, emails, documents with my edits. Even an audio recording from a staff meeting where my dad clearly said, "Once we're stable, Nora will take over officially." "We got a case," he said. Not a guaranteed win, but strong enough to file for equitable ownership, fraud, and promissory estoppel. I didn't know what those words meant at the time. Now, they felt like armor. Still, I hesitated. Despite everything, they were still my parents. My family. I didn't want this. I never imagined it. I didn't grow up dreaming of courtroom battles and lawyers and depositions. I just wanted to bake bread, to build something honest, something lasting. But then came the final push. That weekend, I returned to the bakery to grab a few personal things I'd left behind in the office. The place looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. It felt foreign, hollow. Ethan was at my old desk, feet kicked up, scrolling on his phone. He barely looked up. "Oh, hey, Nor. You good?" I nodded, keeping my voice neutral. "Just picking up a few things." He leaned back in my chair. So weird, right? How it all worked out. Mom and Dad were just waiting for the right time, I guess. I stared at him. Do you actually believe you deserve this? He shrugged, gave me that same smug smile I'd seen too many times growing up. Come on. I mean, yeah, you did a lot, but you were just keeping it afloat. I'm the one who's going to take it to the next level. And that was it. That was all I needed to hear. By the following Monday, Mr. Ellis filed the paperwork. And suddenly, the family group chat stopped. No more emojis. No more casual texts. Now they were sending lawyers. But I wasn't scared, because this time, I had something stronger than a broken promise. I had proof. The pushback, it didn't take long for their answer to arrive. A letter, delivered by courier, dressed up in formality, but soaked in ice. It was from their attorney. Polite, professional, utterly gutless. They denied everything. No promise of ownership. No acknowledgement of my role in the business. They claimed I'd been helping the family voluntarily, that my contributions were simply acts of goodwill. And then, the part that made my chest tighten, they insisted I'd already been compensated. Not financially, not legally, emotionally, because I've been allowed to live rent-free in their house. Rent-free. I read that word 3 times, unblinking. Rent-free, when I paid for groceries out of my own pocket. When I bought replacement parts for ovens the business couldn't afford to fix. When I'd skip vacations, birthdays, holidays, pouring every ounce of energy into keeping that place afloat. They were rewriting the story, twisting it, cutting me out, frame by frame, like I'd never been part of it. And Ethan? He said nothing. No call. No message. Not even a lazy thumbs up emoji. Mr. Ellis had warned me. Betrayal like this doesn't happen overnight, he said. It's usually been simmering for years. Entitlement, resentment, or both. He was right. Looking back, the signs had always been there. I just didn't want to see them. So we moved forward with the case. We filed formal claims, breach of promise, fraudulent inducement, unjust enrichment. In simple terms, they promised me the business, used me to save it, and then handed it to someone else. They hired an aggressive law firm downtown, the type that sends letters meant to rattle you before you even open the envelope. But I wasn't rattled, because they had intimidation, and I had the truth. And more importantly, I had receipts. Every email, every message, every voice memo from my dad asking for help with the launch. Every text from my mom saying, we'll sign the papers soon, just hang in there. Even an audio recording from a staff meeting where my father said, clearly, once we're stable, Nora will take over officially. We submitted everything. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing. I'll never forget walking into that courthouse, dressed in the navy blazer my mom once said made me look too serious. My heart pounded, but my steps didn't falter. Across the room, I saw them, my parents, silent, stone-faced. They didn't smile. Neither did I. The judge asked their lawyer one simple question. Was there ever a formal agreement signed, transferring ownership to Ethan? A pause. Then the lawyer replied, softly, not until recently. The judge raised an eyebrow. Recently? Yes, Your Honor. After the business became solvent. And prior to that, another pause. Well, it was understood within the family. That's when Mr. Ellis spoke. With all due respect, Your Honor, that understanding only existed when it benefited the defendants. And it was discarded the moment it no longer served them. It wasn't a win. Not yet. But in that moment, the energy shifted. They didn't look so confident anymore. They looked small. And Ethan? He wasn't even in the room. Cracks in the wall later that night, I got a text from my aunt, my father's younger sister. Nora, I just heard what's happening. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. If you need anything, I'm here. I stared at the screen for a long time. It was the first crack in the wall of silence that had risen around me since I filed the claim. Then more came. A former employee messaged me privately, saying she'd always known I was the one keeping the place alive. One of her longtime suppliers left a voicemail, offering to testify about how I negotiated fair rates, got them paid on time, and fought to keep them in the loop when no one else did. Even a couple of regulars, customers who came in every Saturday for scones and coffee, commented on social media when the news leaked. Nora was the reason we kept coming back. Without her, it's just another bakery. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it reminded me of something I'd nearly forgotten. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. Still, the nights were hard. There were moments I questioned myself, doubted everything, wondered if I was going too far, if I should just walk away, let them keep what they stole and start fresh somewhere else. But then I'd remember the look in Ethan's eyes when I asked if he thought he deserved it. I remember how easily my parents erased me from the story I helped write. And I knew this wasn't revenge. It was respect. I wasn't asking for a crown or a trophy. I was asking for what I'd earned. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking nicely. The courtroom. The hearing wasn't like in the movies. No shouting. No dramatic outbursts. No gavel banging against polished wood. Just fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The scratch of pens against legal pads, and words sharp enough to slice through decades of family loyalty. I sat at the plaintiff's table, spine straight, hands resting over the leather folder I'd packed myself. Neatly arranged documents, emails, receipts. Every proof I clung to like oxygen. Across from me sat my parents. They didn't smile. I didn't either. Mr. Ellis began, calm and steady. He opened the binder in front of him and flipped through the pages with practiced ease. Your Honor, my client was not a passive participant in the Harper family business. She wasn't a weekend volunteer or a casual assistant. She was the operational lead, the marketing strategist, the point of contact for vendors, and the primary driver of revenue growth. He tapped the binder softly, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. And she was promised ownership, repeatedly, in exchange for her labor. That promise informed every decision she made for 4 years. The judge flipped through the emails Mr. Ellis submitted. One stood out. A message from my dad, dated 1 year before the betrayal. We're getting closer. Can't wait to finally put your name on the papers and make this official. You've earned it. That email wasn't just a detail. It was a spotlight. Their lawyer tried to push back, saying it wasn't a binding contract, that family understandings don't equate to legal agreements, that I acted out of my own volition, not obligation. But the judge was no fool. If she acted out of her own volition, he asked, looking directly at their attorney, why did her father explicitly state she would be given ownership? Why promise something that wasn't intended to be delivered? Silence. My mother shifted in her seat, lips pressed tight. My father stared at the floor, and then he said it. Soft, barely above a whisper. We didn't think she'd take it this far. Not, we didn't promise her. Not, she misunderstood. Just, we didn't think she'd fight back. And there it was. The truth. They never expected me to speak up. They thought I'd swallow my pride, smile for customers, and keep working while Ethan signed his name to everything I'd built. They underestimated me. Worse, they forgot who I was. The spotlight, I didn't speak to the press. I didn't have to. The headline said everything. Family bakery lawsuit sparks questions about gender bias and verbal promises in small businesses. It ran in the local business column, tucked between a restaurant review and a feature on real estate trends. Just a few paragraphs, but it was enough. Because for the first time, someone else was saying it out loud. This wasn't just a dispute. This was about what happens when daughters are expected to serve without recognition, when tradition becomes a weapon, and when he's the man of the family is used as a full-stop explanation. That afternoon, I walked out of the courthouse and found Ethan standing on the steps. He looked different, smaller somehow. His usual smugness was gone, replaced by something I didn't recognize, maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe finally understanding. Nora, he called out, can we talk? I didn't stop walking. Please, he said, taking a step closer. I didn't ask him to do it. I thought you knew that. I turned, slow and steady. Did you ever tell him not to? He hesitated. Did you ever speak up when they erased me from the story I wrote? Silence. That was my answer. I turned and kept walking. That night, Mr. Ellis called with an update. The judge scheduled a mediation hearing, he said. It's a chance to settle privately. I think they're starting to sweat. He paused. They underestimated your documentation and the attention. It's making them nervous. I didn't smile. Not yet. Because this wasn't about humiliation. This wasn't about making anyone grovel. It was about principle. They tried to rewrite the story of the bakery and write me out of it like I was just another footnote. But the real story? It was finally being told. The story of a woman who showed up when no one else did. Who gave up her career, her city, her life, and rebuilt something from the ashes. Only to be told she didn't deserve it. Because she wasn't him. But that era was over. Because this time, my name was going to be on the paperwork. And they couldn't stop it. The mediation, they called it neutral ground. A quiet, windowless office on the 10th floor of a downtown legal building. But nothing about it felt neutral. Not to me. Because how could it? There's nothing neutral about being betrayed by the people who taught you to never lie, and then watching them lie to your face. I arrived early. Navy blazer, low heels, folder in hand. No flash, no flair. I wasn't there to perform. I was there to be heard. 10 minutes later, they walked in. My mother, my father, their lawyer in a tailored suit. No Ethan. Of course not. He never showed up for the hard parts. The mediator, a woman in her 60s with calm eyes and a voice like granite, laid down the rules. We're not here to relitigate the past. We're here to find a resolution, one that is fair, legally sound, and preserves dignity where possible. Dignity. The word landed in the room like a dropped dish. Mr. Ellis began, steady as ever. He outlined the facts, the hours I worked, the financials I managed, the marketing I built, the vendors I secured. He passed across a folder filled with evidence. Emails, voice memos, shared documents, audio clips, and side by side, a revenue comparison. Before I returned, declining in the red. After I returned, growing, stable, then profitable. Undeniable. Their lawyer tried to spin it. Said I was helping out, that there was no formal agreement, that Ethan's ownership had already been finalized. That's when the mediator looked directly at my father. "Mr. Harper," she asked gently, "in your own words, what was your understanding when your daughter left her job to help you?" The silence that followed was so thick, you could feel it settle on your shoulders. I leaned forward, locked eyes with him. "Tell the truth, Dad." For a moment, I saw something flicker, the man who used to read to me at night. The man who taught me how to ride a bike and patched up my scraped knees with Band-Aids and soft words. And then he said it. "We promised her the business. We just didn't think she'd hold us to it." There it was. No denied. No backpedaling. Just the truth, bare and heavy. The mediator nodded once. "I appreciate your honesty," she said quietly. And then, for the first time since this whole thing began, I spoke. "I didn't come back for money," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I came back because I believed in this family. I believed in our legacy, in the bakery, in you." I paused, swallowing down the heat rising in my throat. I worked 6 days a week. I miss birthdays. I miss my life. I carried this place when no one else would. And you used that. You used me. Then you handed it all to Ethan, because he's the man of the family. I looked at my mother. He didn't earn it. I did. She finally spoke, voice tight. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought you'd understand. It's tradition. Tradition." I repeated, my voice sharp and tired all at once. "Do you know how many women are written out of legacies they helped build? How many daughters are expected to give everything and expect nothing, simply because they weren't born sons?" They didn't answer. They couldn't. The mediator cleared her throat. "Let's move forward." And we did. Over the next hour, we negotiated. I didn't want a payout. I didn't want a plaque or a forced apology. I wanted ownership. Something real. Something binding. In the end, they caved. We settled on a 51% stake, the controlling share. I would be the legal majority owner of Harper & Sons within 30 days. Ethan would retain 49% and continue as operations manager. Under my authority, I would oversee all branding, hiring, finances, and long-term strategy. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. When the paperwork was signed, I stood, gathered my things. My father tried to speak. I held up a hand. "Let's not pretend this didn't happen," I said. "We all made choices. Now we live with them." And then I left. Not triumphant, but whole. For the first time in years, I felt whole. The return 30 days later, the ink was dry. The paperwork was filed. The changes were official. My name, Nora Harper, now appeared beside the legal title. Majority owner, Harper & Sons Bakehouse. It looked strange at first. Too formal. Too official. But it was right. It felt like justice had finally caught up. That morning, I walked into the bakery not as the daughter, not as the helper, not as the silent partner who carried the weight without the title. I walked in as the owner, and everything felt different. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was calm. The staff greeted me with hesitant smiles. They didn't know where they stood. They'd seen the headlines, heard the whispers, watched everything unfold from the sidelines, unsure of how to feel. I didn't blame them. So I made it clear from day one. No one will be punished for siding with my parents. No one will be made to choose. This wasn't about revenge. It was about integrity. It was about building something better, not just for me, but for all of us. Ethan avoided me at first. Came in late. Left early. Never looked me in the eye. But he did the work. And I let him. I didn't gloat. I didn't lecture. He knew what he'd done. And if he ever wanted to rebuild trust, that journey would have to begin with him. Not with words, but with effort. A week later, he knocked on my office door. Awkward, quiet. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't handle it right. I didn't deserve it. And I knew that." I looked up from my desk. "I know," I said. He waited, as if expecting something else. But there wasn't anything else to say. Some wounds don't heal with apologies. They heal with actions. Or they don't heal at all. Still, the honesty mattered. More than he probably realized. As for my parents, they stopped coming by. My mom sent a brief, stiff email once, thanking me for upholding the family legacy. My dad never reached out. I don't know if he couldn't face me, or if he just didn't know how. And honestly, that was okay. Because by then, I didn't need their recognition to validate what I already knew. I had earned this. Every inch of it. Under my leadership, the bakery began to change. We refreshed the brand, redesigned the menu, launched a weekend market stall downtown. Our traffic doubled within a month. We introduced baking classes, partnered with local farms for seasonal products, brought in a local illustrator to hand paint our packaging. There was energy again, not just in the store, but in me. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying someone else's dream. I was building mine. But beyond the profits, beyond the growth, something else changed. Me. I stopped apologizing for wanting more. Stopped shrinking myself to keep others comfortable. Stopped mistaking silence for peace. One afternoon, while reorganizing the office, I found an old photo tucked between binders. My grandfather, standing in front of the original shop in the 1950s, arms folded across a flour-dusted apron, eyes bright with pride. I stared at it for a long time, and I smiled, not because I was glad for how it all unfolded, but because I had honored what he started, not with blind tradition, but with truth. Because legacies aren't about bloodlines. They're about effort, about integrity, about who shows up when everything's burning down and chooses to stay, rebuild, and believe anyway. And when no one else stood up for me, I stood up for myself. Now, when customers walk through the door, they see more than pastries and coffee. They see my name on the business card. They see a team that believes in what we do. They see a woman who didn't back down. And sometimes, a younger woman, fresh out of school, chasing a dream, will ask me how I found the courage to take my own family to court. I always tell them the truth. I didn't feel brave. I just knew I deserved better. And if there's one thing I've learned from this entire journey, it's this. Sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is refuse to be erased. They didn't give me a seat at the table, so I built a new one. And this time, my name is carved into the wood. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.